Come celebrate Mom's birthday instead of sleeping. The man speaking so freely to me, hospitalized with a high fever, is my husband who always prioritizes his mother. I've decided. I'm done with this husband. He's out of here. But first, let's stir up a little trouble. I am a very bad wife. And a bad daughter-in-law too. My name is Emma. In my 20s, as a single noble office lady, I never scrimped. Back then, buying deli foods from the French restaurants and enjoying a drink on Friday nights was my greatest pleasure. Now, as a frugal 40-year-old, I prefer gulping down sparkling wine. After all, sparkling wine is better than wine. Sometimes I think it might be nice to indulge like the old days. But my cooking skills have improved. Now, it's more fun thinking up menus that surpass those restaurant foods. Cooking isn't fun when it feels like a chore. But it's enjoyable when you aim to make delicious things. I used to hate cooking when I reached my 30s. It felt like mere labor back then. About 10 years ago. 2 years into my marriage, I was grappling with a particular problem, the relationship between my husband, Kevin, and my mother-in-law. Our newlywed life had been nothing but fun for a while. It all started one holiday when my husband spoke to me. Mom, Em. What? My husband, who always calls me Emma, suddenly said Mom. I was shocked and a bit embarrassed, playfully replying. Calling me Mom is a bit premature, don't you think? Practicing for when we have kids? To my surprise, he became flustered. Sorry, I mistook you for my mom. Mistakenly calling me Mom. I couldn't believe my ears. It would have been better if he had said it was a rehearsal. My husband had never called his mother Mom in front of me before. Unsatisfied with the mistake, I asked what it meant, and he said, It's a leftover from childhood, I've always called her Mom. Although he corrected it as an adult, it sometimes slips out. Because he doesn't want me to think less of him for it. Among my female friends, many still call their mothers Mom. It didn't seem unusual. And I thought it was fine if there were no problems within the family. However, the fact that my husband still calls his mother Mom left me feeling indescribably disgusted. I couldn't understand why I could forgive my friends but not my husband, but it just felt incredibly wrong. He seemed to feel bad about the mix-up, but that wasn't the point. It was more about the fundamental discomfort I felt. After that, my husband, having let his secret slip, seemed to lose his inhibitions. He began referring to his mother as Mom, in the third person more frequently in front of me. And then, another problem arose. Ever since we married, gradually, my mother-in-law seemed to want to meet with my husband frequently. And she began inviting us to her house often. Very often. Originally, my husband had lived at home for a long time. It wasn't that he lived in the countryside, and his job was close to his parents' house. So he didn't need to live alone and could save money. If he hadn't married me, he might have ended up a mama's boy forever. But I had also lived at home for a long time, so it was mutual. However, now I began to wonder if there was another reason for his prolonged home life. Perhaps he loved his mother, or should I say, Mom, too much to leave. Observing my mother-in-law's behavior, it was hard not to think so. At least, it was clear she loved her son very much. I couldn't tell if she was overtly doting. But she certainly wanted to see his face regularly. I understand loving your own child. But he's already a man in his late 20s. It seemed about time for a little child independence, or so I thought, as an outsider. My mother-in-law's welcoming mode knew no bounds. I made Kevin's favorite fried chicken, so come have dinner with us tonight. I found Kevin's favorite snacks on sale, so I bought a lot. Should I bring them over to your place? She kept trying to connect with her son using every trick in the book, and I, getting dragged into it, honestly found it annoying. Mother-in-law, ever heard of personal space? As someone who works in caregiving, going to my in-laws' house at night, or having my mother-in-law visit our home was honestly a hassle. It might sound selfish, but after a draining day at work, I want to relax without having to be considerate of anyone else. Still, it felt cruel to snub my mother-in-law, who was waiting with homemade food. Regrettably, I had told my husband, "It's a bit troublesome to have her come over so often. Why don't you visit your mom by yourself?" I explained to my mother-in-law that I didn't have the physical energy because of my job, and she seemed to understand. Well, it seemed like she didn't care much, whether I came or not. Thus, my husband started visiting his parents' house regularly. I thought that settled it, but only briefly. One day, I came home from work to find my mother-in-law in our house. She had been cooking, waiting for us. Apparently, my husband had given her a spare key and told her, "Think of this as your own home." Wait a minute. I hadn't heard a single thing about this. The table was laden with my husband's favorite dishes, fried chicken, hamburgers, and pasta. If you stuck a flag in that ketchup rice, it'd be a perfect kid's meal. Thank you for cooking, but I'm not a child. I had a bad feeling as I cautiously opened the refrigerator and found that 5 days' worth of ingredients had been used up. It's the food for this house, so I thought it was okay to use it as Kevin said. My mother-in-law explained. But I hadn't heard anything about this. Exhausted from work, I felt like my insides were boiling, but I held back. After all, my mother-in-law meant no harm. But that doesn't make it okay. And the worst part wasn't her, it was my husband, who casually okayed everything without consulting me. In the end, my mother-in-law stayed over that night and returned to her home the next morning. With work looming, I didn't have time to press my husband on why he gave the spare key to his mother. I wanted to discuss this issue as soon as possible, so I set up a time to talk with my husband that evening. Surprisingly, he agreed to the discussion quite easily. "I'm sorry. I'll ask Mom to refrain from using the spare key from now on." He promised me that. But that wasn't really the end of it. Eventually, my mother-in-law started coming to our house once or twice a week to cook and stay over. Unfortunately, my husband hadn't exactly broken his promise. The use of the spare key was to be limited, not forbidden. So that's how it is. Huh? According to my husband, I told her to limit it. But there's nothing I can do if she comes over on her own since she has the key. Are you kidding me? Giving out the spare key was the original mistake. And the person who gave it out is feigning ignorance, which is incredibly infuriating. Moreover, my mother-in-law has taken liberties like rearranging the kitchen and adding kitchenware, treating our house as if it were her own. Am I being too narrow-minded? No, that can't be it. Whose house is this again? It might already be mostly taken over. Proof of that is that my mother-in-law now casually criticizes me. "Oh, Emma, you're using bouillon cubes? Please don't feed Kevin that stuff. I raised him to eat as additive-free as possible." So, the result is a guy who loves kids' meals. I still can't say that. The husband himself chugs juices and supplements full of additives. He loves candy too. My stress had reached its limit. Maybe it would be better to divorce. I've been having sleepless nights. Naturally, my body is screaming. My stomach hurts, and I feel dizzy every day because I can't sleep. Mistakes at work are piling up. Then one day, it seemed my body had reached its limit. I developed a high fever close to 105 degrees. I barely had the energy to crawl. And I would lose consciousness almost immediately if I let my guard down. It's frustrating, but I have no choice but to rely on my husband. Sorry, my temperature has been fluctuating between 100 and 105 degrees. Could you buy me some cooling sheets and a sports drink? Panting, I desperately told my husband. But his response was far beyond what I had expected. What are you talking about? We had a dinner planned at my parents' house today. Huh? What is he talking about? I try to recall, and indeed, I remember that during her last visit. My mother-in-law had said, "Let's have a dinner party at our place next time." She was excited, planning to invite my sister-in-law and her family for a fun gathering. Do you even understand my condition right now? I respond, barely able to breathe. My husband then says, "Well, I'll just go by myself then. See you." And he leaves for work, completely ignoring my request for him to buy some essentials. Doesn't he care that his wife is suffering from a high fever? Is a dinner with his mom that important? Unbelievable. It was a mistake to rely on him. I crawl back into bed, wondering if I might not wake up this time. But I do wake up. The first things I see are the stark white ceiling and curtains. It seems I'm alive, but where am I? This isn't home. My husband peers into my face, smiling, "You're awake." Where am I? At the hospital. I was really shocked. When I came home, you were collapsed in the hallway. I collapsed? Yeah, you seemed to be in agony from a high fever. Maybe you went downstairs to get some water and collapsed near the kitchen. I don't even remember if I was trying to get water. The fever must have reached a life-threatening level. I instinctively feel relieved that I woke up safely. I'm showing symptoms of dehydration. And I have no strength in my body. My stomach has been upset recently. And I feel completely wrecked. It's decided that I need to stay hospitalized for a few days to be observed. 3 days into my hospital stay, the day before I'm supposed to be discharged. My husband calls me. I wonder what it's about. Are you still sleeping? It's Mom's birthday, get up and come celebrate. Huh? I'm stunned by my husband's angry voice over the phone. Telling me, who couldn't even bathe until yesterday due to a fever, to come celebrate Mom's birthday. Is he stupid? There's no way I can go. Besides, they just had a dinner party and now a birthday party? They could have combined them. I swallow all my complaints and respond with a logical argument. I've been hospitalized. There's no way I'm recovered. But my husband replies, "It's just the flu, get over it quickly." True, the diagnosis is influenza. But I believe my weakened immune system is due to recent stress. Whose fault does he think that is? He dismissively says it's just the flu. However, my husband doesn't consider my feelings and says, "You didn't come to the last meal, so you owe it to them." That's it. I'm done. I'm saying goodbye to a husband who prioritizes his mom over me. Did you say something? Nothing. It seems my husband missed my muttered words. Well, that's more convenient for me. I simply tell him, I'll make sure to visit your parents' house once I'm discharged. And hang up unilaterally. Perhaps upset by how I ended the call. My husband doesn't come to pick me up on the day of my discharge. Well, I don't care. Holding all my belongings from the hospital stay, I head to my in-laws' house. Oh, Emma, are you okay? My mother-in-law greets me with a surprised face. Thank you. I'm fully recovered now. I'm sorry for missing your birthday and the dinner party. That's fine, you must be tired. Come on in. While she is kind in demeanor, her expression clearly reads, it's not really pleasant having just the daughter-in-law over. She really doesn't mind that I missed the birthday and dinner parties. After making small talk with my in-laws for a bit, I soon left their house. My home is nearby, but I decided to stop by the local municipal office first. Back at home for the first time in a while, I quickly pack my things while my husband is away. I leave the divorce papers I just picked up on the table. Everything is ready. Then, my phone rings from my mother-in-law's number. I ignore it at first as it keeps ringing, and soon I see almost 20 missed calls. I finally answer, and to my surprise, it's my husband's voice over the phone. What's this about? Dear, why are you calling from your mother's phone? What do you mean, what's this about? What's this letter? Oh, you've read it then. A grin escapes me as my husband speaks. Then, apparently snatching the phone from him, my mother-in-law demands, is this true? Yes, it is. So, in the background, my husband shouts, Mom, it's not like that. But she seems not to hear him. That's because, when I left their house, I left a letter detailing the truth about my husband. At first, I was completely deceived. But actually, my husband isn't mom first. He's just pretending to be, while he's actually extremely annoyed by his mother. I overheard him talking on the phone with someone who seemed to be his junior. I'll treat you next time. What? Money? Oh, I can get as much as I need from my mom. No problem. Seriously, parents are like ATMs. At first, I thought I misheard. But it seems this is indeed how he feels. He finds his non-independent mother annoying, but lets her have her way to get an allowance. He gave out our house keys because he wanted more pocket money than usual. Apparently, he had been receiving about $1,000 a month from his mother, who is into stocks. However, with the truth now exposed to his mother, and having kept his true feelings hidden from his sister-in-law and father-in-law, he's been regretting and stressing over the increased interactions with his mother. Why would you? My mother-in-law is speechless. And that person, your son, he's quit his job, you know. What? My mother-in-law is dumbfounded, and my husband is desperate. What are you talking about? When she asks him if he's quit his job, he falls silent. I've been getting his resignation papers and pension book at home, so it's undeniable. You thought you were hiding it from me. But when we live in the same house, you can't hide anything. The call goes almost silent on the family's end. They probably put me on speaker, so everyone heard what I said. My husband mutters, well, there were circumstances. Yes, gambling at the casino during work hours, important circumstances, right? That's why you got fired, isn't it? You were telling your junior about it. Hey. My husband panics, and my in-laws are appalled. Kevin, you liked gambling? You were hiding that from me? In response to my question, my husband hesitated and said, "Well." When pressed by his father to give a clear answer, he began, "Actually, it seems my husband has been a fan of gambling since his college days. He had kept it a secret from both me and his family, sneaking off to casinos during work breaks, so no one knew about his gambling habit. His workplace was fairly lax, and there were others doing similar things. At first, his results at work were good enough that his behavior was overlooked. However, as he gained more responsibilities at work after we got married, it became harder for him to visit casinos, which only increased his desire to gamble. Eventually, he lost control, spending more and more time at the parlors during work hours, until it was noticed by his workplace. Despite repeated warnings, he continued his long visits to casinos during work hours and was finally fired. No company pays a salary for gambling. I'm just too tired of your duplicity and our life together. As I spoke my truth, my husband raised his voice. Even so, what's this divorce paper? Divorce is too extreme. Think it over. I'll think it over. I've thought it over just now, and I still want a divorce. You haven't thought it over at all. Are you seriously telling me to reconsider? Staying with an unemployed gambler who lies and didn't care even when I was dying? Instead of my husband, it was his mother who agreed with me. Yes, she's right. What, Mom? Aren't you on my side? I'm just an ATM to you, right? Automatic teller, Mom, that's what you think. After all the pain I went through to give birth to you. No, I mean, you're important to me, Mom. Then Emma's claims are false? Of course. Why did you panic then? When I read this letter, and immediately went to your house to ask you, Kevin, you looked pale. That is. Sigh. Your inability to answer says it all. It seems Emma was telling the truth. Wait, Mom. Give back all the money I've given you. Wait. Think it over, okay? I don't care anymore. Mom. I'm sorry. As I almost burst out laughing at the desperate exchange between my husband and his straightforward mother, I said, "So, I'm divorcing you, but just so you know, I'll be asking for a division of property without considering your financial situation." My husband was at a loss for words, and on the other end of the phone, his father was laughing, "It's your own fault," while his mother was likely speechless, thinking, there's no defending him now. Thus, my husband lost the trust of his mother, the support of his father, and me, his wife. All that remained was the debt he owed to his mother. After that, as you know, I'm not Mom first. I want to change my ways, let's try again. My husband repeatedly begged for reconciliation, but I naturally refused. The problem wasn't that he prioritized his mother, it was that he was full of lies. Such an untrustworthy man is not suitable as a partner. When I firmly told him this, he seemed deeply shocked and never asked for reconciliation again. The discussion about reconciliation had been muddy, and it was hard to get him to agree to the divorce, but it was successfully finalized. He has to repay the money to his mother and is now desperately working at his new job, which pays less than his previous one, and he is being scolded by younger supervisors. Well, it's a good experience for a pampered husband. His mother has also become distanced from her sister-in-law's family due to this incident. Disgusted, his father started spending less time at home, leading to a much lonelier life than before. Well, she still has her beloved son, hopefully. His affection returns to her. Meanwhile, I started managing a cat cafe with the money I saved from work. Honestly, there's hardly any profit. It's mostly break-even or a loss due to the expenses of caring for rescue cats. But it's fulfilling, and I feel like I'm gaining something more important than money. Knowing I'm helping the cats. Although I'm single, the cats are like family to me. That's what I thought. But recently I had a big argument with someone from an NPO doing cat rescue work about strategies to protect cats. Normally, I'd think, I'll never deal with this person again. However, we both deeply care about animals and oddly hit it off. We're not dating, but we've started going out for meals together, and I can feel his kindness. For my birthday, he gave me a cat mug that matches his. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe, just maybe, something could happen. Just kidding.
I'm going to file for divorce. I don't want the kids, she said with a heavy heart. Her husband had left the house, leaving behind their 3-year-old twins and their newborn daughter. I had a hunch for some time that he was cheating, but with childcare and work, I had no energy to confront it. I can't do this anymore, she muttered to herself. Just then, one of the twins clung to her, saying, "Mommy, we love you." The beloved children looked up at her with worried faces. Despite her anger towards her husband, something snapped in her at that moment. Well, I'll just file it, she decided. I immediately signed the divorce papers with a smirk. He's the one who's going to be in trouble. He doesn't realize how much I've been supporting him, she thought bitterly. Unknowingly, he had begun his descent into hell. I'll be home late again. How many times have I heard that, she pondered. My name is Sarah. I'm 34. We got married 4 years ago, and he was 2 years younger, which led me to spoil him at first. The following year, we had twin girls, and 3 years later, another daughter. His return home began to get extremely late around the time our last child was born. I hope the third one is a boy. I've always dreamed of playing catch ball with him, she remembered wistfully. He was excited during the pregnancy, but his attitude soured as soon as he found out it was another girl. At the hospital, he grimaced upon seeing our newborn daughter. She doesn't look like me. She's not cute, he remarked callously. At that moment, intense anger welled up inside me. How can you say your own child isn't cute? I seethed silently. Maybe he was already considering divorce by then. Even after I came home from the hospital, his sulkiness continued. He barely helped with child care or showed any interest in the kids. If you're short on hands, hire a babysitter or something. You've got savings from your job, I suggested, growing weary of his neglect. I worked at a top tire company, earning significantly more than most women my age. On the other hand, my husband struggled to keep a job, often quitting before I even noticed. Perhaps he was envious that I was more successful at work. At the time, he was also doing temporary work and unsure of how long it would last. I didn't expect any financial support from him, but I wished he'd at least fulfill his role as a father. Spend some time with the kids at night, at least, I pleaded with him. What a hassle it was. When I asked him to do it, he reluctantly obliged, but it was so apparent that my daughters were bored with it. He somewhat realized he wasn't being embraced by them, which he didn't like, leading to a terrible, vicious cycle. Then, one day, he stopped helping with the kids altogether. I'm tired from work. Let me rest on the weekends, he said, brushing off his responsibilities. And on weekends, he either stayed in his room or went out with someone. I have to work this holiday. If you don't watch the kids. She trailed off, the frustration evident in her voice. I have plans too. See you. My husband leaves without listening to me. I could not leave the children alone at home, so I often had to ask for a babysitter last minute. If it continues like this, it would surely destroy our marriage and negatively affect our children. Thinking this, I decided to talk to my in-laws the next day. However, that's just how husbands are. A wife needs to be patient. More importantly, could you do that thing we talked about last time? My visit to my in-laws ended with them ignoring my concerns and asking for favors. My parents live far away, so it's hard to meet them. I feel guilty even calling, not knowing who to turn to. Hey, make dinner. Returning home in the evening, I'm greeted by my husband in pajamas and a messy house. The kids, bored, playing with toys, instantly smile upon seeing me. Where have you been all this time? I had to stop by the Unler for a bit. Hurry up and make dinner, I'm starving. If you've been home all day, couldn't you do some laundry or clean the bath? Hearing this, my husband snorted in amusement. I decided not to do anything for someone who doesn't show gratitude. What do you mean? I cleaned the bath yesterday, and you didn't thank me. Not that I mean, like, at least $100, he stretched out his hand, gesturing for money. What is he talking about? I must have looked distant, tired, and irritated. I pulled him aside to the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear and retorted, I am working, doing the chores, raising the kids, all of it. And you have never *****ed me. That's a wife's job. Then what's your job? I work too, he retorted defensively. He barely earns $1,000 a month and does nothing around the house. Our argument lasted about an hour until, Mommy, I'm hungry, my daughter's call snapped me out of it. My husband left in a huff, but I ignored him and rushed to prepare dinner. During these tense days, I discovered something, my husband is cheating. I confided this to a colleague from college. She had divorced due to her husband's affairs and advised me to gather evidence immediately to tell the truth. I noticed my husband's affair quite some time ago, just before our youngest was born. I noticed a sweet fragrance on him, wearing perfume. When I casually asked my husband just after he got home, he broke into a sweat and started stuttering. In addition to that, he is coming home very late, talking less and less, and his attitude towards children. There were many signs, including the disappearance of intimacy, but what really convinced me was a certain event. There was a lipstick in the pocket of your jacket. It's mine, my lips get chapped, you're using Chanel's pink lipstick. Maybe it's my mom's, his evasive answer sounded like a lie. Then, as he hurriedly said, I need a bath, and stripped off his dress shirt on the way to the bathroom, I sighed. What is that? It's clearly there was a hickey in a place usually covered by clothes. I was about to go over to my husband, but I immediately thought better of it and decided to gather evidence first. Take your time warming up, I smiled sweetly, pretending I hadn't seen anything. The next day, coming home late from overtime, my daughters were already asleep, and the room was wrapped in silence. We need to talk. Only the dining room light was on, and there he stood, holding a piece of paper. I can't take this anymore. Let's get a divorce. What? Just file for divorce. I don't want the kids. Without waiting for my response, he handed me the divorce papers and left. Mommy, the sound of the door closing woke up the twins, who looked at me worriedly. It's okay, sorry for waking you, though, I told my daughters. It was okay, but it clearly wasn't. He's reached his limit. That's my line. And what does he mean he doesn't want the kids? Mixed emotions swirled in my head, and I hadn't even noticed the tears streaming down my face. Mommy, we love you, sensing something, the girl said just that and hugged me tightly. At that moment, I came to my senses. I can't go on like this. I can't worry these little girls. I realized that as long as I have my children, I'm happy, and this is what I should have done from the start. Though, well, I'll just file it. When I said this with a blown-out look on my face, my daughters smiled, and we all slept soundly that day. The next day, I filed the divorce papers first thing in the morning and called a certain person. Yes, please go ahead with it. It's my husband who will have trouble. The person on the phone listened to my story and took action. This was something I had considered before. If my husband betrayed me, I would end everything we had been doing. If that ruins his life, it's none of my business. 3 days later, Sarah, where have you been? Waiting for me as I returned from work were my in-laws and my husband. My mother-in-law was furious, my father-in-law pale, and my husband seemed clueless, dragged along without understanding the situation. Have you been waiting at the front door all this time? That's kind of creepy. This is no time for that. What is this? My mother-in-law thrust a letter at me. It's a notice from a lawyer. I can see that much. Her face was tomato red as she raised her voice. I need to pick up my daughters, so excuse me, ignoring them. I went inside, but my furious in-laws followed me into the living room, insisting on a discussion. Why would you suddenly send this? I don't understand. You would understand if you read the letter, wouldn't you? Using a lawyer, how cowardly. Despite being in the wrong, my mother-in-law's outrage was something else, mixed with irritation and confusion. I was constantly thinking about how to convey my feelings. Then, my husband, who seemed to understand nothing, finally spoke up. Are you upset because I divorced you? Filing some kind of complaint. My in-laws looked at him dumbfounded. Of course, he had no idea what I had done for them all this time. Hey, I didn't hear about any divorce. Is that why this is happening? Such a useless son. What are you two so anxious for? You've ruined everything. As the conversation between them went nowhere, I watched coldly as my mother-in-law slammed the table. Why did you divorce Sarah? My husband clammed up when things got uncomfortable. Since the conversation wasn't going anywhere, I decided to answer for him. He completely failed to fulfill his duties as a husband and father. There you go again. I told you that's just how men are, right? So, you would forgive your husband if he had an affair? What? My mother-in-law froze, clearly not expecting to hear her son had been unfaithful. My husband tried to interject, but a sharp glare from me shut him up. Then, oddly, my father-in-law started defending his son. A men's affair is just a fling. It's not a problem. This is pointless. Please leave. All further communication will need to go through my lawyer. So, what are you talking to a lawyer for? Now you're agreeing to the divorce, right? My husband was confused, clueless about what was going on. Agreeing, I filed for divorce straight away. Then what is all this about? While arguing with my husband, my mother-in-law suddenly started crying loudly. Paying $556,000 in one lump sum is impossible. What large sum? What are you talking about? Who's paying whom? Finally, the moment had come. Time for my husband to regret. I proudly revealed what I had kept hidden until now. It was right after we got married 4 years ago. I was called to my in-laws' house alone, where my mother-in-law said she had a serious matter to discuss. Nervous just because she was his mother, I was prepared to help however I could. But the words that came out of her mouth were shocking. I need $60,000, she said out of the blue, leaving me utterly confused. As I hesitated, she bluntly asked about my salary. Unable to withstand her pressure, I admitted it was over $100,000, and her eyes lit up, apparently. My father-in-law had gotten into horse racing, losing big amounts without ever winning, and had even accumulated debt. Desperate for $60,000 to cover his debts, she pleaded with me, and I couldn't say no, repeatedly insisting she must pay me back. 4 years passed, and all I got back was just $4,000. There were times when she repaid some, only to borrow again. If I don't do something, I will never be able to collect the full amount. So, I hired a lawyer and filed a lump sum claim for the remaining $56,000 in full. My husband's jaw dropped when he heard this, and I almost laughed. But we said we'd pay back little by little. Why suddenly and in full? We're no longer family, so I thought I shouldn't hold back, I explained. Then, my mother-in-law, with a screech like a monkey, turned her fury towards my husband. It's your fault for cheating, so you should be the one to pay it back, huh? Why should I? We're not working anymore, and our pension won't cover it. If you want me to live in your parents' house, you'll do what I say. There was no way he could pay back $56,000 in one lump sum, especially since he was unemployed again at the time. I'll live at Kate's place, so I won't pay. That's the name of your affair partner, my mother-in-law declared. As I grew increasingly absurd listening to this family quarrel, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. Don't think it ends with $56,000. I'm demanding $20,000 each from you and your affair partner as compensation, plus child support, of course. What? It's only fair. Leaving your children to play around. Where's the proof I cheated? Had he forgotten so quickly about loudly declaring he'd live with Kate? Sighing, I handed him a pile of photos I prepared for this moment. Looking at these made me sick. The photos were from his social media, showing him kissing and embracing his affair partner, definitely a no-no as confirmed by my lawyer. Why do you have these? My husband asked, shocked. A quick online search brought up your social media. It's amazing you thought it wouldn't be found, I replied. My naive husband had kept posting cheerful photos on a public setting. He probably continued to use social networking sites without knowing how horrible they were. I was surprised that he was doing this, being mechanically inept, but it made it easy for me to gather evidence of his cheating. Even my in-laws were dumbfounded, gaping at him. Please leave now, it's time to go to daycare. At least don't demand compensation from Kate. What if she runs away? That's not my problem. With no resolution in sight, I forcefully kicked the family out. Open this. Help me. I didn't know about the debt. I could hear my husband yelling through the door for a while. I'm calling the police. I yelled, and the three of them shrugged and left. A year has passed since then. After paying me the compensation, the affair partner disappeared. Because of this, my ex-husband had to live at his parents' home, where they incessantly demanded he cover the $56,000. He ended up borrowing from shady lenders. While he managed to pay that off quickly, he still owes $20,000 in compensation for the affair and $500 a month in child support. Now, he earns his daily wage by doing manual labor from morning to night. The interest on his debt is ballooning, and it might be impossible for him to pay it off in his lifetime. But that's none of my business. Mommy, we're going to be late. Oops, my daughters are calling me to daycare. They're growing up so healthy and strong. That's all the happiness I need.
Lily, $100 a month for groceries should be more than enough. If you can't make that happen, we'll just call it quits. Matt's words hung in the air like a bad smell. I stared at him, feeling a cold disbelief wash over me. You've got to be kidding me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No joke. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smug smile playing at his lips. Prove you're not that useless, Lily, or we're done. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. This was the man I'd married? My husband of 5 years? I took a deep breath, the anger coursing through me like wildfire. Fine, I said, finally managing to speak. I'll do it. Matt shrugged as if it were no big deal. Good luck with that, he said, already turning his attention back to his laptop. I walked to the kitchen, his words echoing in my head. Useless. The man who used to praise my cooking, who loved every meal I put on our table, now reduced me to this? I grabbed a notepad and started jotting down meal ideas, my mind racing with determination. That night, as I lay in bed beside Matt, I stared at the ceiling. He was already asleep, completely unbothered by his cruel ultimatum. I replayed our conversation, every word a dagger to my heart, and something inside me shifted. This challenge wasn't just about groceries. It was a test of my worth, a value he'd callously questioned. I wasn't going to let him win. The next morning, I woke up early and headed to the store with my notebook in hand. I had a list, carefully planned out to stretch every dollar. As I walked through the aisles, I felt a strange mix of rage and resolve fueling my steps. "I'll show him," I muttered under my breath, reaching for the discounted vegetables. By the time I returned home, I was exhausted but determined. I pulled out my phone and started filming. Hey everyone, it's Lily. Today we're tackling an impossible challenge, a month's worth of groceries on $100. As I chopped and cooked, I felt the knot in my chest begin to ease. The camera became my confidant. I shared recipes, tips, and tricks, pouring my heart into every post. The notifications soon started to ping. Comments, likes, new followers, total strangers cheering me on in this absurd quest. When Matt walked into the kitchen that evening, I was plating dinner. "Smells good," he said, eyeing the meal with a rare hint of approval. I didn't answer. I was too fired up, too focused on proving him wrong through every flavorful bite. As days turned into weeks, my online community grew. Each meal I managed under the budget felt like a victory, not just over Matt's challenge, but over his belittling judgment. The more successful I became online, the more I realized how much I had let myself be defined by his cruel standards. And so, with each dish and every supportive comment from my newfound followers, I built my own fortress of resilience, one recipe at a time. It wasn't just about saving money anymore. It was about reclaiming my worth, about showing Matt, and more importantly myself, that I was far from useless. Sitting at the kitchen table, I flipped through an old photo album. The early days with Matt. Smiles, laughter, shared dreams. My fingers traced our wedding picture, pausing as the memories flooded in. "It's hard to believe we were so happy once," I murmured to myself. Our first date had been at a small Italian restaurant. Matt had been charming, attentive, hanging on to my every word. "You have an amazing smile, Lily," he had said, eyes twinkling under the dim lights. I had blushed, feeling special and truly seen. "Thank you, Matt. I really like you," I had replied, shy but excited about the possibilities. Back then, he appreciated everything I did at home. "This lasagna is incredible, Lily. You spoil me," he'd say, wrapping me in a warm embrace. Those moments felt distant now, like scenes from a movie that had long since ended. I shook off the nostalgia and stared at my camera. My growing hobby on social media had become my refuge. Hey everyone, it's Lily again. Today I'm sharing my favorite lasagna recipe, affordable and delicious. I said, starting the recording. Cooking had always been my joy, and sharing it on social media was a way to reclaim a piece of myself. As I cooked, memories of Matt and me laughing in the kitchen played in my mind. He used to help me chop vegetables, sneaking kisses in between. But that laughter had been replaced by his cold eyes and harsh words. Scrolling through old photos, one caught my eye. It was a candid shot of me, giggling as Matt tried to flip a pancake. The warmth of those days, the sincerity in his laughter, where had it gone? My phone buzzed, snapping me back to reality. A notification, more followers, more support. Cooking for strangers who valued my tips more than Matt had in years felt strange, yet rewarding. Each comment cheered me on. "You're amazing, Lily. These recipes saved me so much." While my social media presence blossomed, Matt became more distant. He spent late hours at work, giving me a generic apology when he bothered to offer one. "Sorry, Lily. Big project. You understand," he'd say, dismissively planting a kiss on my forehead before retreating to his phone. With cooking videos and the supportive online community, I found myself less concerned about Matt's coldness. I replied to comments like I was catching up with old friends. "Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed the recipe." One afternoon, I set up my camera for another video when an idea struck me. I opened the fridge and checked its sparse contents. Let's make something amazing with what we've got. Watch how we turn these scraps into a feast, I declared, hitting record. It was both a challenge and a defiance against Matt's cruel test. That night, as I set the table with a humble but delicious dinner, I waited for Matt's reaction. "This looks good," he said grudgingly, eyes not meeting mine. The praise felt hollow, almost mocking, but inside, I knew I was more than his cruel words. With every dish I shared, with every follower gained, I rebuilt my confidence. Matt would come home later and later, and the man in those happy photos felt like a stranger. But I found solace in my own growth and the strength I never knew I had. We used to laugh together, dream together. Now, our home was silent except for the click of my camera and the buzz of notifications, the world cheering on a woman determined to rise above betrayal. It started slow at first. Matt's missed dinners, the cold shoulder, the excuses wrapped in important business meetings. I would wait at the table, the meals I worked hard on growing cold. Frustration bubbled under my skin. One night, he walked in well past midnight, the scent of perfume lingering around him. I sat on the couch, the dim light from the TV casting shadows across his face. "Late again," I noted aloud, not even trying to mask the bitterness. "Work, Lily. You know how it is," he replied curtly, not even offering an apology this time. I watched him walk to the bedroom, anger twisting in my gut. Resolute, I logged into my social media accounts instead. The numbers had climbed again, more followers, more engagement, people genuinely interested in my recipes, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. "Hang in there, you're doing amazing, Lily," one follower commented, lifting my spirits in small yet meaningful ways. As Matt's absences grew more frequent, I threw myself deeper into my content. Each meal, each new recipe shared became my silent rebellion. It was more than cooking, it was proof of my worth. I filmed everything, from budget-friendly gourmet meals to heartfelt kitchen hacks. The community's love and support started filling the void Matt left. "Hey guys, today we're making a $5 feast," I said into the camera, a determined smile on my face. Despite everything, I felt a strange sense of empowerment, each new like and comment validating my efforts, but the doubts still gnawed at me. One afternoon, as I chopped vegetables for a new video, I broached the subject that had been on my mind. As Matt walked in the door, I turned to face him. "Matt, have you thought about starting a family?" I asked, voice steady though my heart raced. He looked at me like I had just suggested the most ridiculous thing imaginable. "A family, Lily? We can barely manage as it is. What makes you think we're ready for that?" His words were sharp, cutting deeper than the knife in my hand. "Is it really about that, or are you just not interested?" I pressed, needing to hear the truth. "Don't start with this now. I'm too tired for your nonsense," he snapped, brushing past me again. The sting of his rejection settled deep. With Matt coming home less and less, the house felt empty. His coldness was a stark contrast to the warmth and excitement I found online. It became routine, his late nights, my growing channel. I knew something wasn't right, but I also knew I needed more than his disdain. I kept filming and posting, each video a small victory. As my small success started to translate into brand deals, I felt the tide turning. The nights Matt spent away from home only fueled my drive. Despite the pain and isolation, I found comfort in the screen's glow, a beacon of hope and validation. Little did Matt know, his neglect and cruelty were pushing me toward something stronger. His distance gave me room to grow, to prepare for what was coming next. With every new follower and every night spent alone, I found resilience I never knew I had. I was on the brink of uncovering Matt's true nature, and when I did, he'd see just how strong I had become. Another day, another challenge. This would be the third week since Matt dropped the bomb with his ultimatum, and my spirits were oddly high. The $100 grocery budget had become my battlefield, and I was winning. I prowled the aisles of the supermarket looking for deals, comparing prices. People might say it's impossible, but I'd managed to stretch every dollar. I picked up a pack of chicken thighs, discounted and perfect for multiple meals. When I returned home, I set up my camera. "Hey everyone, today we're making 3 meals out of this pack of chicken. Can we do it?" "Of course we can." I began filming with a confidence that felt almost strange, yet very real. As my audience cheered in the comments, Matt's absence became a dull ache in the back of my mind. His late nights continued, his presence at home minimal. I moved around the kitchen like an artist in her studio, every chop of the knife a brushstroke against the canvas of betrayal he had painted. Matt stumbled through the door later that night. I was on the couch, answering messages from my followers. He walked into the kitchen, looking around for the meal I'd prepared. "Where's dinner?" he asked, voice gruff from what I guessed was another night out. "In the fridge. I saved you a plate," I replied without looking up. He grumbled as he heated it up. "You know, this budget thing isn't going to work forever," he said between bites, his tone laced with condescension. "Maybe not," I replied calmly, typing another response on my phone. "But I'm making it work now." At the end of the month, I reviewed our expenses. I had done it. I proved him wrong. I filmed a special video to mark the achievement. "Hey everyone, guess what? We've completed an entire month on a $100 grocery budget, thanks to all your support." My followers' encouraging comments poured in. Matt's reaction, however, was as heartless as ever. "So you did it. Big deal. Don't expect a medal," he said, tossing the statement carelessly over his shoulder. Frustration bubbled up, but I swallowed it down, determined not to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Instead, I poured all of it into my cooking. Every critique from Matt was met with another video, another shared recipe. The tension in the house was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. Our conversations were limited to basics, a flimsy facade of normalcy. Meanwhile, my social media presence grew stronger each day. Fans eagerly awaited my posts, and engagement skyrocketed. One evening, while editing a new video, I heard Matt on the phone in the next room. His voice was low and secretive. "Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow night. Same place." I paused, the words hanging in the air. A cold realization began to form. It wasn't just work keeping him away. My hands shook as I continued editing, playing the dutiful wife while pieces of a darker puzzle slowly clicked into place. The $100 challenge had come and gone, but something far more challenging was on the horizon. But first, I needed proof. Proof that he was the vile and manipulative man I was beginning to see clearly. From that moment on, every step, every meal, every message to my followers became more than just a hobby. It was preparation for a showdown I knew was inevitable. And I would be ready. Mark my words. I would be ready. I was unloading groceries when I heard Matt's voice from the living room. He was on the phone again, talking in that hushed tone he'd adopted lately. This time, I was determined to catch every word. "No, Lily doesn't suspect a thing," he said, a disgusting smirk in his voice. "Meeting you is the only thing keeping me sane right now." My heart hammered in my chest. I crept closer, hiding behind the kitchen door. "Don't worry, Taylor. Friday night is ours. She thinks it's another late meeting." I felt the blood drain from my face. Matt was having an affair. My body moved on autopilot, arranging groceries while my mind raced. I needed proof. Later that night, lying next to the man betraying me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his deceit. But instead of falling apart, I felt a steely resolve harden within me. I reached out to my growing community online for the strength to follow through. The next day, I called a private investigator. "I need your help," I said, clutching the phone tight. "I think my husband is cheating on me." "Let's meet. I can discuss what we'll need to do," he responded, his voice firm yet kind. After our meeting, the investigator began his work while I threw myself back into my cooking videos. On social media, I smiled and shared, all while piecing together the destruction Matt was bringing into our lives. As I documented recipes, the investigator gave me regular updates. "He's definitely involved with someone named Taylor. They've been meeting at the same hotel every Friday night," he informed me one evening. It stung, but I kept calm. "Thank you. Keep digging," I replied, determination underscoring every word. The evidence piled up quickly. Photos of Matt with Taylor, incriminating text messages, receipts for lavish dinners, and gifts. It was sickening. Each new piece of information was both a dagger to my heart and a nail in his coffin. On the Friday of their next rendezvous, I put on my dinner table smile as Matt prepared to leave. "Big project tonight?" I asked sweetly. "Yeah, don't wait up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Of course. Good luck," I replied, feigning innocence. Once he was gone, I sat down with the evidence, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, betrayal, and something else, relief. His demand for the $100 grocery budget, his absence, his coldness. It all made sense now. I stared at the pile of proof before me. The private investigator had even gathered videos, Matt laughing intimately with Taylor, looking at her the way he used to look at me. The anger simmered, but I held it back. The next morning, I confronted Matt. Evidence spread out on the table. "Care to explain this?" I asked, voice steady but cold. His face went pale, eyes widening as he took in the photos and text. "It's not what it looks like." "Save it," I snapped, cutting him off. "I know everything. About Taylor, about the money you've been wasting on this affair. You thought making me stretch $100 would distract me?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. The shock, the guilt, the realization of what he'd done, it was all written on his face. "From now on, you're on your own," I said, packing the evidence into a folder. "I'll be talking to a lawyer. We're done, Matt." As I walked away, I felt lighter, stronger. Out of Matt's betrayal, I had found my own power. And this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, the weight of what I'd uncovered giving me no rest. But today was different. Today wasn't about waiting. It was about action. As Matt stumbled into the kitchen, barely awake, he didn't even glance at me. "Where's my breakfast?" he growled, his usual demands cutting through the silence. I met his eyes with an icy stare. "You want something to eat?" I tossed a crumpled $2 bill on the table. "Here's $2. Get yourself some cheap junk. Figure the rest out yourself." He froze, confusion and anger flashing across his face. "What do you mean? This is ridiculous." I didn't flinch. "Ridiculous? You think your affair is ridiculous? I know everything, Matt. Taylor, the hotels, the money you've wasted." I threw the folder of evidence onto the table, its contents spilling out. His face turned a sickly pale. "Lily, I can explain." "No, you can't." I kept my voice firm, every word a blow to his crumbling facade. "You pushed me to prove my worth. You tested me. Now it's my turn." I watched him scramble to find words, any words, but there was nothing left to say. I reveled in the silence, then turned and walked away, leaving him amidst the evidence of his betrayal. Once I was out of the house, I called my lawyer. "I need to file for divorce, and I want to make sure he pays for what he's done." My lawyer, Sarah, didn't miss a beat. "Gather all financial records, any proof of infidelity, anything that shows misconduct. We'll make sure he gets what he deserves." Armed with her guidance and my newfound determination, I dove into preparing my case. At the same time, my social media following was buzzing. Subtly, I started sharing snippets of my story without mentioning Matt directly. Sometimes, life throws challenges that test our strength. I posted alongside a photo of a simple yet elegant meal. The comments overflowed with support, my online community rallying around me in ways I'd never expected. Each day, I became more focused. Sarah and I met regularly, carefully piecing together the case that would ensure justice. Meanwhile, Matt's attempts at reconciliation became more desperate. "Lily, can we talk?" he pleaded one evening, blocking my path in the hallway. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, pushing past him with a cold stare. His workplace caught wind of his affair soon after. Whispers and side glances followed him in the office. Taylor, now exposed, tried to keep her distance, leaving him more alone than ever. As my cooking brand continued to rise, I felt the tide shifting. My focus wasn't revenge for its own sake. It was reclaiming my life, my worth. I plunged into new projects, developing recipes, and making plans for a future without Matt. On the day of our court hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Sarah by my side. Matt looked gaunt, defeated. The evidence was overwhelming, and the judgment was swift. He would pay dearly, financially through alimony and socially as his reputation lay in tatters. As we exited the courtroom, Sarah turned to me, her smile filled with genuine warmth. "You did it." I nodded, a weight lifting off my shoulders. This is just the beginning. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was the freedom from years of deceit and manipulation. But the journey wasn't over. Matt's world was only beginning to crumble. The first crack appeared when Taylor publicly distanced herself from him. Word of their affair spread like wildfire in his professional circles. "I can't be associated with this mess," she told him during their last clandestine meeting, which ironically wasn't so clandestine anymore. The private investigator had made sure those images surfaced at just the right time. Matt staggered into the house late that evening, a shadow of his former self. "Lily, please. Can we talk?" His voice was strained, desperate. I glanced at him with detached indifference. We have nothing left to discuss. You made sure of that. He tried to approach, but I stepped back, a barrier he couldn't cross. He was imploding, and for the first time I felt nothing but a cold, distant satisfaction. That night, I posted a new video, my mind whirling with new ideas. Hey everyone, today's recipe is all about fresh starts and new beginnings. Let's make something amazing. The community's responses poured in, each comment a brick in the new foundation I was building. Meanwhile, Matt's downfall accelerated. News of his affair leaked to his boss. The company couldn't risk the scandal. He was summoned to a meeting and returned home with a cardboard box filled with his desk's remnants. I lost my job, Lily, he muttered, helplessly dropping the box by the door. Not my problem, I said, not even bothering to look up from my laptop. I was deep into planning my next online event, a cooking class live stream that was already attracting sponsors. Days turned into weeks, each one worse for Matt. Without his job, his income plummeted. The judgment from the court added a financial strain he couldn't handle alone. His so-called friends vanished, each slipping away to avoid the mess he had become. One evening, sipping coffee in my new favorite cafe, I received an email. My first cookbook was officially published and ready for pre-order. I could hardly contain my excitement. I shared the news with my followers, the comments overflowing with encouragement and pride. Returning home, I found Matt rummaging through old bills, his despair palpable. I don't know how to fix this, Lily, he said, tears brimming in his eyes. That's your mess to clean up, I replied coolly. You brought this on yourself. Watching him unravel was a stark reminder of the man he truly was, a man who tried to break me but ended up shattering himself. I felt a strange sense of closure. Moving forward, I immersed myself in new projects, cooking segments, sponsorship deals, and community events. Each success was mine alone, a testament to my resilience. Matt moved out a month later, defeated and broken. The house, now silent without his toxicity, became my sanctuary. I redecorated, shifting from old memories to new aspirations. From the ashes of betrayal, a stronger me had emerged. With my growing brand and supportive followers, I was ready to embrace a future untethered from the past. My story wasn't about revenge or loss anymore. It was about rebirth, a new chapter waiting to be written. The first morning in my new apartment was surreal. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the minimalist furniture I'd carefully chosen. The space felt fresh, free from the shadows of the past. I brewed a cup of coffee and took a deep breath. The air smelled like potential, like new beginnings. With my recipe book published and my social media thriving, today marked the start of something beautiful. I sat down at my kitchen counter, scrolling through messages from followers. Congratulations on the new book, Lily. Can't wait to try the recipes. Each comment felt like a step farther from my old life. As the day progressed, I finalized details for a cooking event, a live class that had drawn considerable interest. My phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, each one a reminder that I was building something all on my own. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. It was a delivery, a bouquet of vibrant sunflowers with a note, "To new beginnings, with love, your fans." I smiled, placing the flowers on the table. Their brightness mirrored my newfound optimism. Later, preparing for the live stream, I couldn't help but think of how far I'd come. The screen blinked to life and hundreds of faces filled the grid, each one eager to learn from me. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're making a special recipe from my new book. It's all about transformation, taking simple ingredients and turning them into something extraordinary, I began, the excitement in my voice matched by the enthusiasm in the comments. The interaction was electric, each step met with applause, each tip eagerly absorbed. I felt a deep connection, a shared journey of resilience and growth. By the end, the chat was filled with praise and gratitude. "Thank you, Lily. You've inspired us so much," one comment said. "No, thank you," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "You've all been my strength." After the class, I settled into the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on the path that led me here. The old life with Matt felt like a distant memory, a heavy coat I had finally shrugged off. A few days later, I heard through mutual friends that Matt was struggling. His new job was low-paying, and Taylor had left him after realizing he couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted. There was no satisfaction in his misery, only a reminder of what I'd escaped. I poured my energy into new projects, expanding my cooking brand, planning future books, and engaging more deeply with my online community. Each venture was a brick in the sturdy foundation of my new life. One evening, as I signed copies of my book at a local bookstore, a woman approached me. "Lily, your journey has been so inspiring. You gave me the courage to leave my own toxic relationship." Her words touched me deeply. Thank you. It means the world to hear that. We all have the strength to rebuild, even when it feels impossible. As I returned to my apartment that night, the city lights twinkling outside, I felt a profound sense of peace. The woman's words lingered in my mind, solidifying my purpose. Revenge had given way to something much more fulfilling: empowerment, growth, and the unwavering belief that I could forge my own path. My past with Matt was a chapter closed, and I was ready to write the rest of my story, one filled with hope, resilience, and endless possibilities.
Has that poor old hag finally kicked the bucket? I glared at the man, annoyed by his words. My ex-husband, who ran off with his mistress, leaving his blind mother behind. It was hard to believe he was the son of that once kind-hearted woman. His crude remarks brought my anger to its boiling point. You must have had it rough, huh? Well, now you're free. But, come on, someone your age, there's only so much freedom you can enjoy, right? His obnoxious laughter echoed as I smiled sweetly, hiding my fury. Yeah, I got the $3 million inheritance. So I'll be living freely from now on. The smile vanished from my ex-husband's face. Little did he know, soon he'd be on his knees begging for my forgiveness. My name is Emily. I'm 63 years old. I got married young and ended up living with my in-laws. They were kind people, but my husband was a disappointment. We divorced 10 years ago when I was 53. At that time, our eldest daughter, Mia, was 18, and our son, John, was 15, right when education costs were the highest. On top of that, my mother-in-law was blind. Taking care of the kids and my mother-in-law was far from easy. I met my husband, Tom, at work. I was 18 when I joined the company, and he was 24, 2 years out of college. He was older than me and seemed reliable, so I admired him. Tom was always looking after me when I was still inexperienced, and he had a caring nature. Despite being popular, for some reason, he took a liking to me and asked me out. When we got engaged, I visited his parents for the first time. His father had trouble walking, and his mother was blind. I was deeply moved, seeing how Tom supported them while managing his job. However, my own parents were against the marriage. They were worried that marrying into a family with obvious caregiving responsibilities would be too much for me. But Tom's parents were such wonderful people, and I was still young. I ignored my parents' concerns and went ahead with the marriage. My parents were so angry that they cut ties with me, but by then, I had a new family. When you're young, you feel invincible. Nothing seemed scary at the time. After we got married, I quit my job. I took it upon myself to care for my in-laws and manage the household, so that my husband could focus on his work. My in-laws were so grateful to me and treated me like their own daughter. They always expressed their thanks and never forgot to show their concern for me. Spending so much time with them made caregiving challenging, but it wasn't a burden. My husband worked late every day, and I believed everything was going well in our home. One day, I ran into an old colleague from work while coming back from the grocery store. Naturally, the conversation turned to my husband and me. My colleague said, "Tom is such a great husband. He always leaves work early because he says you're having a hard time. He's really something, isn't he?" I couldn't believe my ears. Tom never came home before 10 p.m. That was hardly early. It had to be some sort of mistake. Still, I couldn't say anything at the time. So I awkwardly smiled and replied, "Yes, that's right." Later that evening, I mentioned it to my husband, intending to test him a little. "You've been coming home late a lot lately. Couldn't you come back earlier? Your dad seems to feel bad about having me, a woman, help him with everything. At least you could help him with his bath." But before I could finish, Tom yelled at me. "What? I'm working. I'm not playing around. Tell Dad to stop being so picky." Your father didn't say anything. I just thought he might feel that way. It was clear my husband had no intention of helping with the caregiving. On top of that, he seemed overly defensive. I had a sinking feeling that my suspicions were right. But at the time, I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge it. I was afraid of what would happen if I pressed him and uncovered something I didn't want to know. After all, I had married him against my parents' wishes, and I had nowhere to go. I also worried about my in-laws. In the end, I decided to continue on with my life as usual. One day, I thought about getting an electric wheelchair for my father-in-law. He was using a cane and a regular wheelchair. But with an electric one, he could enjoy short walks. I imagined pushing my blind mother-in-law in her wheelchair alongside him, so we could all go a bit farther on our outings. I shared the idea with my husband, fully expecting him to agree. But his reaction was less than enthusiastic. "Really? Do we need that?" He looked pained as he replied. "I'm barely keeping us afloat on my income alone. Do we really need to waste money like that?" It was true we weren't wealthy. But I didn't see it as a waste if it made his parents even a little bit happier. "Then, how about we pay it off little by little using your parents' pensions? Maybe we could borrow a bit from the bank too?" At that, my husband seemed somewhat convinced and said, "Just don't make it my problem." Of course, I couldn't tell my in-laws exactly what he said. Instead, I told them that he'd agreed to let us take out a loan. And my father-in-law was delighted. We went to the bank together, got a loan, and purchased the electric wheelchair. My in-laws were very happy with it. However, not long after, my father-in-law passed away. Both my mother-in-law and I were heartbroken, but my husband muttered, "He just left us with debt. I told you we didn't need to buy it." I was sure my mother-in-law heard him. I felt incredibly guilty. It was just the two of us, my mother-in-law and me, living in the house now. Even though she was blind, there were some things she could manage on her own inside the house, which lessened the burden on me quite a bit. Around that time, my husband suggested we start thinking about having children. I had once doubted him, but hearing that, I convinced myself that I must have misunderstood something. We eventually had 2 children together. But unfortunately, my husband didn't change even after they were born. He still didn't care about anything related to the household. I was overwhelmed with housework and raising the children. But at least my mother-in-law seemed happy, which was a small comfort. Though she couldn't see the grandchildren, after my father-in-law passed away. Having the kids around seemed to lift her spirits. She'd been so down, but now she smiled more, listening to the children's lively voices. Despite everything, we managed to live happily enough. Still, just as my colleague once said, my husband continued to come home late from work. I'll never forget what he said at my father-in-law's funeral. He didn't show any love toward his mother or our children. Lately, he would even leave on his days off, saying he was going to work. And I'd stopped feeling any affection for him. I began to think that as long as he brought in money, that was enough. Our broken marriage continued like this. But our children grew up to be kind and thoughtful. The real change in our family came in the spring, when our daughter was 18 and preparing to go to college. I'm heading to work. It was a Saturday, a day he was supposed to be off. I stopped him before he left. You promised to take your mom to the hospital today. It was a promise he'd made just a few days earlier. Today was my mother-in-law's health checkup. And it was also the day we were set to get the keys to our daughter's new apartment, where she'd be living on her own during college. We'd known about these plans in advance, so I had asked him to take his mother to the hospital. What? That's your job as a housewife, he shouted at me. I told you, today's the day Mia gets the keys to her apartment. We need to set everything up for her before she starts college, and I said I'd go with her. When I snapped back at him, my husband got angry too. I had no memory of ever talking back or defying him before. The fact that I was standing up to him for the first time seemed to make him even more agitated. I didn't sign up for this. I married you because I thought I'd be stuck with an old man. And an old hag who no one else wanted. And now you want me to take care of her? If you can't take her, let her go by herself. I was speechless. How could anyone be this cruel? I had sensed for some time that he didn't care about his mother. But to suggest sending a blind woman out alone? And to insult me like that. It was unbearable to find out the real reason he had married me. I was filled with regret. That's enough. That's all I said to him, finally giving up on expecting anything from him. Satisfied that I didn't argue back, he said. All right then, you take care of the old hag and the kids. And with that, he left the house and never came back. In the end, our daughter had to handle getting the keys to her new apartment on her own and buy everything she needed for her new life. Meanwhile, I took my mother-in-law to her health checkup. Somehow, we made it through the day. Everyone noticed that my husband hadn't returned, but no one said a word about it. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from my husband. There was no return address, only his name. And inside was a divorce agreement and a brief letter. He wrote that he was living with his mistress now. Didn't want anything to do with the debt left by his parents. And told me to live my life without him. I was exhausted. If this is how things were going to be, cutting ties with him would make me happier. That's what I thought. Before submitting the divorce papers, I told my kids and my mother-in-law. The person who took it the hardest was my mother-in-law. I'm so sorry. She just kept repeating that, crying as she held my hand. I've been happy enough with you, Emily, and Mia and John. But once you're divorced, I'll be a stranger. I'll live on my own from now on. It'll take some time, but I'll move out. That's what she whispered. I responded a bit more firmly. You are like a real mother to me, and to the kids. You're their one and only grandmother. You don't need to worry about anything. Even if I divorce, we're still family. Let's keep living together just as we have been. Hearing that, she sobbed and thanked me. But I couldn't ignore the fear that lingered in the back of my mind. Even if my husband was only an ATM, his presence had provided some financial security. Now, he was gone. I desperately looked for a job, but after years of being a housewife, no one wanted to hire me. Both Mia and John offered to work. When I was beginning to lose hope, my mother-in-law said, "Don't worry about anything. Let the kids go to school as usual. Emily, you don't need to work either. Leave it to me." We were puzzled by her words, but as she promised, nothing in our lives changed. In fact, we were living more comfortably than when my husband was still around. I submitted the divorce papers. And my mother-in-law wanted to file a missing person report for my ex-husband. But I didn't want to see him again. Still, I knew she wanted to see her son, so we filed the report. However, my ex-husband was never found. We continued to live as a family of 4, creating many happy memories. 2 years ago, my mother-in-law passed away and joined my father-in-law. She never got to see her son again. Even though he was her child, there was no way to contact him. When I managed to find his address, no one lived there anymore. We had a small funeral for her with just the 3 of us, and we said our goodbyes. And now, standing in front of me is my ex-husband. I was out shopping when he suddenly appeared in front of me. I thought I must be mistaken and tried to ignore him, but he kept staring at me. He recognized me. He must have thought the same, because he looked over at the much younger woman standing beside him and spoke up, showing her off. Emily, right? Still looking as miserable as ever. That's a bit rude, huh? The woman beside him giggled as she said that. It was clear they were mocking me, and I sighed. I was about to walk past them when my ex-husband said, "Has the poor old hag kicked the bucket?" I froze in my tracks and glared at him. The poor old hag? Who are you talking about? He snickered and replied, "You know who I mean. That blind old woman you were stuck living with. Heard through the grapevine she passed. Must have been tough for you, huh? Well, now you're free. Though for someone your age, there's only so much freedom you can enjoy, right?" His disgusting laughter echoed in the air. My anger reached its boiling point. But I knew that reacting now would only play into his hands. I forced a smile, hiding my rage. Yeah, I got $3 million from the inheritance. So now I'm living freely without having to work. Thanks for your concern. What? The smile disappeared from my ex-husband's face, though he had just been mocking me moments ago. Well then. As I tried to walk past him, he stood there dumbfounded. Then, in a panic, he called after me. Wait. $3 million in inheritance? What are you talking about? What do you mean, what am I talking about? I mean exactly what I said. Thanks for disappearing, by the way. It made the inheritance process go smoothly without you. My ex-husband's face turned pale. Good, I thought. I hadn't planned on telling him anything. But he deserved to know just how shallow and foolish he really was. You've got to be kidding me. I'm her son. How come I never heard about such a large inheritance? I should have a right to some of that money. I couldn't help but smirk at his words. Oh, but you weren't around. You know, right? If you go missing for 7 years, the law treats it as if you're dead. What? So, in your mother's will, the inheritance came to our son, our daughter, and me. There's no place for you anymore. He stood there, dumbfounded, his expression ridiculous. I nearly laughed out loud. It was only after my mother-in-law passed away that I realized she had planned this all along, asking me to file a missing person report for her son. The substantial inheritance my mother-in-law had left behind. A man who introduced himself as a lawyer came and explained everything to us. It turned out that my mother-in-law's family had been landowners. Like me, she had been estranged from her family, but she still had the right to inherit. When her parents passed away, she quietly took the inheritance without telling anyone. Thanks to her, we were able to live comfortably without worrying about anything. I remember asking her once, Mother, how do you manage your money? If it's just from your pension, please feel free to spend it however you like. My mother-in-law smiled and said, I'm spending it exactly how I want, living happily with my family. That's what she told me. From the way she used her money, I knew it wasn't just her pension. But it was her money, and given our situation, we gratefully accepted her generosity. The inheritance she received was far more than she could ever spend in her lifetime. The issue was my husband. If something had happened to her, he would have inherited everything. But she didn't want him to have it. When she discussed this with the lawyer, my husband disappeared. She felt it was a sign that he had severed ties with us. Although she was sad to be separated from us. She had planned to move into a nursing home, thinking she wouldn't burden us. And would spend the inheritance until there was nothing left. But both our son and daughter, as well as myself, insisted that she was family and that she should stay with us. My mother-in-law said there was nothing in the world that made her happier than that. My mother-in-law had wanted to leave the inheritance to us. So she followed the lawyer's advice and filed a missing person report for my husband. By law, after he had been gone for 7 years, he was considered legally dead. A year after that, my mother-in-law passed away. And her inheritance was passed on to her grandchildren. Our son and daughter, in place of my husband. Although I wasn't entitled to inherit anything. My mother-in-law left a will that included me as a beneficiary. This way, we were able to receive what she had wanted to give us. You left, and your mother took care of everything. Mia's tuition, John's, and all our living expenses. Thanks to her, we were able to live happily. So, thank you for leaving. My ex-husband stood there, pale, his mouth gaping like a fish. Serves him right, I thought. After that, he started contacting us. Ranting about how he was entitled to a portion of the inheritance. This from the man who had been completely silent for years. What a piece of work. People who are legally dead don't get a share of the inheritance. I told him that over and over. Still, he wasn't satisfied and demanded we sit down and talk. I consulted our lawyer. For him to claim any inheritance, he'd need to revoke the missing person declaration and go through a lot of legal procedures. In most cases like this, the grandchildren keep the inheritance. We had no intention of giving him a single penny. I relayed the lawyer's advice to him. If he wanted to inherit, he would also need to pay inheritance tax. When I told him to take care of all that, he fell silent. The kids were present during the conversation as well. I can't take time off work. I don't have time for paperwork. And inheritance tax? I shouldn't have to pay that. You guys should pay my share too. I supported you for years. The least you can do is handle this for me. His audacity left us speechless. Apparently, he was working a day labor job now. And missing even one day was problematic for him. The job he had while we were married? He got fired after repeatedly skipping work without notice. When I asked why he left that job and why he was struggling so much financially, he admitted he had debts, thanks to his former mistress. He'd been moving from place to place, working day-to-day jobs just to pay off what he owed. You understand, right? He said, but I couldn't muster even a drop of sympathy. That woman you were with didn't work out, huh? Then who was that woman I saw you with recently? Puffing out his chest, my ex-husband replied. She's the one I've been searching for all my life. He was clearly lost in his own delusions. Our son, John, was trying hard to hold back his laughter. Are you married to her? I asked. Well, no. We've only been together for 6 months. My ex-husband mumbled in a small voice. That was enough to send our son into fits of laughter. My daughter and I were too stunned to say anything, simply sighing at the absurdity in front of us. And what about the woman you left with when we got divorced? She left. Said she couldn't make me happy. He said it so casually, without even realizing that he had been dumped. He must have gone through woman after woman, never understanding the problem was him. You're not young anymore. Stop pretending you are, old man. I couldn't help but give him that piece of advice, feeling embarrassed for him. But she's the one, my soulmate. Hearing that, I realized that it was pointless to say anything more to him. At least I had found out his address after running into him again. He was living in the next town, in an apartment under a woman's name. My son, John, ended up buying the entire building and becoming the landlord. Grandma gave us that money, and it'd be a waste just to let it sit. I figured investing in real estate would be a smart move. That's what John said. I thought he might have done it to help his father, but that wasn't the case. In fact, if the rent was even a day late, John was quick to go and demand it. The previous landlord had been lenient, but not my son. Mom went through so much because of him. He chose this selfish lifestyle, so he should struggle more than you ever did. It was John's way of punishing his father. My ex-husband had never done anything fatherly for the kids, so it was only natural that they had their own feelings about it. Eventually, unable to endure his new life, my ex-husband came to me, fell to his knees, and begged for forgiveness. I'm so sorry. I was wrong to leave everything to you, including taking care of my parents and the kids. Seeing him like that made me sigh. He was desperate. But, I have my own life now. Couldn't you ask John to lower the rent just a little? He asked with teary eyes. It must have been tough for him. I don't know. If you had at least been a good father to the kids, things wouldn't have turned out like this. You failed as a husband, as a father, and as a person. Now, what do you have left? What was your life even about? You should think long and hard about that. With that, my ex-husband quietly left. His figure looked so small as he walked away. In the end, after repeatedly failing to pay rent, he was forced to leave the apartment. He moved into an old, drafty building that was about 50 years old. I heard he's still working day-to-day jobs, struggling to make ends meet. The soulmate he had been with when I saw him that day? Apparently, she left him when he moved out of the apartment. He had been paying her living expenses, and since he couldn't afford rent anymore, it wasn't surprising she left him. In fact, he should be thankful she stayed with him as long as she did. She was still young, and like me back then, she probably didn't see who he truly was. As for us, we're living happily now, thanks to my mother-in-law. Just like John said, we invested in real estate and stocks. And now we have passive income that allows us to travel and enjoy life. And Mia is getting married. Her fiancé is a kind man, and he treats me well too. Our family is growing, and our happiness will only increase from here. I can appreciate this joy all the more because we overcame such a difficult past.